Hello. Thank you for logging in to our online version of the Grassroots Training for the Early Voting Challenge. My name's Ekashdan. I'm the Assistant Director at Common Cause, Massachusetts, and we're just about to get started here. You'll be able to see the PowerPoint and listen to the audio of our session. We're going to cut the virtual version short at the breakout groups portion of the session, and I'll give you some directions later on at that point about what your next steps will be. But you can access the full PowerPoint from today, as well as the volunteer toolkit that we'll be teaching everybody about in the training session, by going to the two URL web links that are in the description of this video, or you can go to www.earlyvotingma.com. Thank you. We're going to get started in just a bit.
Good evening. Good evening. How's everybody doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right, great. Thank you all so much for being here. We're so excited about what we're going to bring to you this early voting. So we're going to do some quick introductions of everybody. We want to know everybody in the room and where you're from. But I'm going to start with the coalition that we put the Election Modernization Coalition. I'm going to introduce everyone that's a part of this initiative and this effort and this campaign to really have a wonderful launch of early voting. So we have with us Pam. All right, introduce yourselves. How's that?
Pam Wilmot, Common Cause. I live in Boston, Jamaica Plain. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Tommy Wolf from the ACLU of Massachusetts. I live in Cambridge.
Hey, it's Ben Martin McDonough from Massachusetts. I live in Alston.
Tony Mack, Massachusetts Voter Table. I live in Cambridge.
Over here at the table.
I'm Tina Thompson from Massachusetts, and I live in Cambridge.
And over here at the pizza.
I'm Shaughnessy. I'm from Mass. I'm the youth coordinator.
Do we have anybody else here?
Yep.
Oh, there we go.
Eric Ashton, I'm from Common Cause. I live in Boston, but I'm from Saugus.
All right. So this is a coalition that's been working really hard to and diligently to put this together and to bring it to you. So we want to know who you are. And we can do it starting right here with, so we'd like to know who you are, where you're, what your organization you're affiliated with, if you're affiliated with one, and where you live.
Corey Allen, Madison Park Development Corporation. I live in Madison.
All right.
I'm Terry Cherry. I'm from Worcester, from Neighbor to Neighbor. Oh, sorry, Terry Cherry, Neighbor to Neighbor from Worcester chapter today.
Fantastic.
Hey, what's
Want to go here and come back? All right, she's ready.
I'm eating.
From
Stop.
Lynn from Worcester, of course. Neighbor to neighbor.
all right.
Ralph Walton. I'm a resident of Boston.
All right.
Right.
Thank you, Ralph.
My name is Phil from New Bay, and I live in Randolph, Mass.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Marina, and I am with Newbra Neighbors United for Better East Boston, and I live in East Boston.
All right.
Hi, I'm Christian. I'm from Toolkit, and I'm from East Boston.
Fantastic.
Jean
Yes,
Casper, Common Cause, I live in Salem.
Okay.
I'm Dick Terry. I'm with Common Cause.
Okay.
I'm Elsa. I'm from Chinese Vocation Associate. I live in Boston.
Nice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tia Cersei. I'm with 1199.
Okay.
My name is Dolores. I'm from Boston for Even.
Feedback. Okay. Great.
Mimi Ramos with United for Justice, organized in Boston, but I live in Fall River.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm Margaret, United for Justice, and I live in Boston.
All right. Good to see you, Mike.
Yeah, see, good to see you.
Yes.
I keep up with your Facebook.
All right.
Troy Mead, United Justice. I live in Lynn, but I work in Madison.
All right. Right there.
Sylvia from the Chelsea Collaborative, and I live in Chelsea.
All right.
Myrna Avila from the Chelsea Collaborative, and I live in Chelsea.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Monday we're from
Chelsea, all right, great. Fantastic.
Gloria Ramirez. Neighbor to neighbor.
I'm Jose Palma with Neighbor to Neighbor, and I live in Lima.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is Danny. I live in Augusta. Neighbor to neighbor.
Fantastic.
I'm Barbara. I live in Rosendale. I work in Dorchester with Massachusetts.
Yes. Ah.
I'm
Fantastic.
Good evening, my name is Wendy. We have 3500 and
Fantastic.
Brother Kenny lives in Dorchester with last vote B500.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kendall. I live in Dorchester, and my organization is doing United for Justice.
Nice.
And I'm now from Dorchester, I'm with New England United for Justice.
Great.
Hi, my name is Violet Tom. I'm from United for Justice.
Good to see you.
I live in Brighton.
Right.
I work with a number of organizations, actually in Turkey, and I live in Arlington.
All right. Wow. And the mayor of Chelsea just walked in. Introduce yourself.
Okay, ¿y tu nombre?
Great. Introduce yourself. Come on. And you're from what organization? Chelsea Collaborative. And where do you live? Chelsea. Introduce yourself. I know you all just came in when you wrapped up intros.
Barbara.
Barbara from
Hyde Park.
all right. And what's your name right here? Melody. And you're with fantastic. Do we have everybody who can do?
My name is Christian, and
Fantastic.
I am with your coalition.
Fantastic. So everybody give yourself, introduce yourself. eBay. Nice, nice. Everybody give yourselves a hand. To Pam.
Hey, everybody. Take you through the boring part of the presentation. So, interrupt as we go along. So we start off with our introductions. This is what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to cover what the early voting law is and what our recommendations are that we're trying to get you to help advocate for. The contest is put together to try to push that agenda forward, and then we're separate. That's the exciting part. Separate by city to talk about how we're actually going to do this campaign. So that's the opportunity to really talk with your friends and neighbors to figure out. We're going to do a short report back after that, and I'll pass out some information about how that's going to go. And then opportunity for questions. So does that sound okay? Any questions so far? All right, let's go. We already did that. Okay, so is a process of voting before 32 other states already have early voting. 34 have already passed it. We're the 35th state to have passed early voting. So we're a little behind. Passed in 2014 as part of an initiative of the Election Modernization Coalition. All the organizations that were introduced first are part of that. It was a comprehensive law that included all sorts of things like online voter registration. So now you can actually go on the web and you can register to vote or update your voter registration. Pre-registration of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. So now when you go to get your driver's license, you'll be able to register to vote. That has not been implemented yet. That's going to go in August. Audits of election equipment. So that's another thing that's going to be coming in at the next election, and they haven't really set anything up. The reason for that is that you can actually hack some of these machines. And so this just goes randomly after the election and checks to make sure the machines are reading the ballots right. There's a few other things that are going on around, fixing inactive voter lists. There are too many people on the inactive list. The bill expanded or reduced the number of people who get on that list. So we think this is a big step in the right direction. So let's just take for just a minute, early voting is an 11-day period before the election. It actually starts 2 weeks, but it doesn't include the last weekend. Before this, in order to vote early, you have to vote absentee. And absentee have 3 different kinds of excuses. In order to get absentee ballot, you have to say you're not going to be in your city, or you had to have a physical disability or a religious exemption. If you were a poll worker and working at a different poll, you would be committing perjury to get an absentee ballot. People did it all the time. I bet you many people in this room did it, but that's not right. So early voting fixes that problem and allows us to do a step in the right direction for getting more people involved. So the law had a lot of flexibility in it, though. And it said that in order to do early voting, again, this 11-day period beforehand, each city and town got to decide how they were going to do it. Each city and town has to provide at least one voting site during regular business hours. But in Boston, if we have early voting 9 to 5 in City Hall, how many people are going to be able to take advantage of that? Not many, exactly. That's just not good enough. Now, there is in Massachusetts. There's literally one town that's a bunch of islands down by Cape Cod that's only 60 people. They don't need a lot of extra hours. They don't need a lot of extra sites. But Boston certainly does. Worcester certainly does. Springfield certainly does. Lynn, some of these, the larger areas is really where this is going to have a big effect, and we really need to push them to do the right thing. So, one of the questions I heard earlier from Ralph, how are people going to do this? The early voting ballot is much like an absentee ballot, but you don't have to have those excuses. There's no requirement to have a police officer at the voting site. And it's not clear how many staff, but it certainly doesn't have to be a full complement of all the election workers. So it can be done much more cheaply. Another thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't say that the voting is done by precinct. So we're not going to have 200 early voting sites in Boston. That would be really silly. But what we're going to do is have, a number, and we'll get where people can go and cast their ballot wherever they're from. At least that's what we really would like to do. So if you're working downtown, you can go to City Hall and cast your ballot from anywhere in the city. Or if you're shopping you're going to, you're in Chinatown, you can vote there for anywhere you want. So, so why are we doing this anyway? This early voting has been rolled back by Republicans in a lot of other states because it actually does expand the electorate, particularly in areas where people move a lot, where people have a harder time getting to the polls. And we believe that it expands access to our democracy because of that. It provides more opportunities. We're in a busy society where people have a lot of things on their plate, and getting the polls from one day is a really high hurdle to get there. It can modestly boost turnout, particularly in those populations that are very stressed. It can also make administering the elections better. So in Boston, we had 3-hour lines in 2012 and several polling places. And other places were 2-hour lines. There were 2-hour lines in Worcester. There were some 2-hour lines in Springfield. Not every polling place, but on certain ones there were. What early voting will allow is to sort of smooth that out. So get people in the system voting early so that, you know, if I'm going to wait for, I don't know, I would wait for 3 hours. I really commend the people that did wait for 2 hours, 2 and 3 hours. That's amazing. But hopefully we won't have any of that once we have early voting. What do we need the reality of having no lines, access to voting, people can vote when they want to? We need to ensure that we have enough hours, enough places for people to vote to really make this work. And we did a little study looking at all those other 32 states that already have early voting and came up with some recommendations I'll talk about in just a second. A couple other things we found is that telling people that you can actually vote early is important. So getting the word out, advertising, bringing them to the polls early is something that's critical. And then also getting the right sites. So having some innovation there. A lot of places, actually, Worcester is starting to improvise with some grocery stores and some things like that. Other states have found that those can be very helpful. It's not just having them kind of isolate in a small building. All right, next one. So when we looked at the data overall, we found about one site for every 35,000 people is about what we were, what the standard was across the country. Boston, that's 17 sites. You know, you guys, the Boston group, can talk about what you think the coalition was thinking, maybe more than or 10 or 12 or something like that. But that's something you guys can decide together what makes sense. Boston is very dense, it's very big. But if you go by this standard, you know, Worcester is, I think, 5. So it's very doable. 4 or 5. So municipalities, as we talked about, should consider some of these other areas. And then hours are the really big, the big issue. Because it isn't just where you're going to do it, it's when you're going to do it. Evening hours are really critical, and having hours on the weekend when people aren't necessarily always going to work. So let's go to the next slide. So these are the standards that we talked about. We made this little contest called the Early Voting Challenge, where we're going to give these little medals to communities that actually meet these standards. And so for a gold medal, it would be one site for every 35,000 people, except for Boston, that they get a little pass. Evening hours, at least 2 times per week during early voting, and 6 hours of weekend voting during the early voting period. And silver is one site for the same number of sites, but only one evening of early voting and 4 hours on the weekend. So, you know, I think either one of those are really pretty commendable. It's a big step to go from what we have now to this. And we found in the past when we did this little campaign around putting stuff on the internet that having a little medal was a big carrot for municipalities for some reason. So hopefully this will help. I'm not sure. But with your help, I think we will succeed. Next slide. Questions? Yeah.
So technically, for the next election, this needs to be in place, right?
Yes.
So if the next election is November 7th, this needs to start way before it like
11 days. It's about 2 weeks before is when the period starts. It's 2 weeks before.
sometime in October.
Yep.
So it is our job as community activists to push on the local city councilors to get this implemented.
That's right.
And if that doesn't happen, huh? I know in Chelsea it is, but my question is, what happens if there's city officials don't want this going? Is it going to be penalized? Is it going to be like a, I don't know what will happen?
The campaigns really have to be very focused for each municipality because, like I said, they're so different. What you want to do in a community is very different in 600,000 in Boston. And then also the different forms of government are very different. So who actually calls the shots? Is it a strong mayor? Does the mayor really call the shots? Is it the town manager that really calls the shots? Is it the city? But if they don't, they have to have, but they only have to do it during regular business hours in one place, regardless of their size. So they have to do it. That's all. We can, say shame on you if they don't go along.
And my other question is regarding the silver or the gold. Fridays Friday evening will be considered weekend hours or only Saturday and Sunday?
We hadn't considered that. So,
because I mean, most cities or early.
That would be an evening. I would say evening, but we'll talk about it in our group.
Okay.
A question over there?
Is this apply to municipal elections as a primary?
Very good question. No. It only applies to the general election every 2 years. So it doesn't apply to the presidential primaries. It doesn't apply to the primary in September. It only applies in November, and it's not going to apply to the mayoral elections either. So it's gubernatorial and presidential. There is a commission that is going to be started right after this election. It's going to look at how did it go? Does it make sense to extend to all the other elections? Because it is going to be a little confusing. On one hand, during the presidential and a competitive gubernatorial, you got more people going to the polls, and the issue of long lines is significant where it isn't as much. On the other hand, there's a lot of confusion between saying you can do it, you can't do it, where you can do it, so. We had a question right here.
Right. Who is going to pay for these elections? Because you're asking cities and towns to promote staffing to be open on weekend.
So, again, because the staffing does not have to be the same that it is in an election, you don't have to have a police officer. You do. We found that the average cost was about $400 per site per day in other states. So $400 per site per day isn't a lot of money, but the cities and towns would have to come up for that themselves. Yes, that is right.
Plus there's other options. So if they're open from 9 to 5 and they decide to stay open 2 nights during the week, they can open from 11 to 7. So it's up to the cities and towns to do some creative thinking. That's going to be what we're going to be helping them think about, right? Alternative to the 9 to 5, maybe it's 11 to 7, 2 of your staff. Start thinking outside the box.
Yeah, shifting things around.
Having 3 or 4 sites across the city. Now you're talking about more staff, more money.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
there's definitely some, but you know what? The sites are usually free. So the sites are not a question. It is staffing. There are some staffing issues, which hopefully they can do some creative budgeting. And we have a question back there.
So I was wondering, I had a conversation with our city manager on Monday because it was the inauguration night, so I had access to the city clerk, everyone was there. So I told them about this meeting that we're doing, and they were not able to come or participate, but they want to be involved. And one thing that he said, he make sure understand and how much money is appropriated, because right now this is when he begins to work on the budget items for this fiscal year. So it would be excellent if we have examples of what other states are doing. And for the size of a small city like Chelsea, how much it costs for them to run. Understanding that on Tuesdays is our long day. City hall closes at 7 o'clock, and that can be one of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. When we're talking about having multiple sites, and Pam probably mentioned it in the presentation. When we're talking about multiple sites, we're talking about population over 35,000 people, right? So any city or town that's less than 35,000 people, we're not asking them to. That's not a part of the silver gold thing. You know what I mean? Like they won't have a need to have multiple sites. Whereas in Boston, where there's 600,000 people, we have to figure something different.
So
exactly. Exactly.
And I've talked to Jared, the city manager, and David Rushford are really, yeah. So early voting MA has a report on stage 2 and so we're going to have another, we're just going to talk about the resources, and then we're going to get to our breakout sessions, the resources that are available.
One more question.
Yeah.
Finances. Can we get any help with that? Thank you. The cities and towns somebody with this. Is that a possibility?
Well, can you repeat the question was, can the feds provide additional money? And the answer is probably not. What could be potentially available, but is very unlikely to be available, is about $5 million. Oh, it's more than that. It's $50 million that Galvin still has sitting in a bank account that was appropriated as the Help America Vote Act. It can be used for training. It can be used for infrastructure. It cannot be used for staffing. So Galvin is very difficult to lobby. We have not been successful. You know, we have some minor success, but very, very difficult. But that is one thing the cities and towns could start hammering him about, at least for some training issues, for some infrastructure, for technology. Those are all things that money can be used for. They cannot use it for poll workers, however. So just so you know what's happened so far in terms of sort of the activist side of this. The coalition had a press conference and launched the challenge on November 5th. We did an email announcement to city and town clerks and all municipalities. We also did an email to city councils and mayors and things for those communities above 35,000. We had a fair amount of press coverage, and we had a fair mixed reaction from municipal officials that wrote back via email or made some phone calls. We also met with Deanne Irish in Boston as a coalition, and David Rushford called right afterwards and said, but mostly those were in the smaller communities rather than. So next slide. So hopefully you'll have the nice officials. Obviously, you know, as an organization person, they have no accountability to me. They have accountability to you, the people that live in their communities. And your ability to organize is also going to relate to how responsive they are and how they're able to address this. So, you know, as we talked about, there's just such diversity in Massachusetts. Most states organize their elections by counties, and that tends to smooth out a little bit of the differences. There's only a few states in the entire country that organize their elections by municipality, and that is makes us a little different. Vermont is also by municipality. Rhode Island, but Rhode Island is, the whole state is barely bigger than Boston. So, so as we talked about, each decision is really budgetary, and all these goals are going to be decided community by community. So we're hoping that you're going to join a team of activists from different organizations, from your own community, and are going to try to figure out a campaign to get this into as best shape as we can, provide as many opportunities to voters as we can. And you guys are organizers, so I think you know how this goes. You got a power map, you got to meet with people, you got to figure out a plan, and we have some resources that will help, and we're all coalition ready, willing, and able to stand and provide guidance. Next one. So the toolkit is one of those resources. You got this when you came in. It has a number of documents in here. There's the first kind of a guideline for some of the things that kind of needs to be done, almost like a checklist. You know a lot of this stuff already. And it has that URL that I was talking about that has all those resources there. The second is a handout. Talking points. Again, sort of about some that I've, as well as a few common objections. That gets a little bit more in depth to what we've been talking about. But at the very end is some of the objections. And then the last document is just some lobbying tips. Again, I think most people, it seems like in this audience, are pretty sophisticated. You may know those, but it doesn't hurt to go over them. There's a little sample letter to the editor, because informing the community about what's going on is also important. So media strategy is part of the campaign. And the very last thing are in a town, which not very many people are. You might need to go to towns decide things by a vote of the people of the town, and you can actually put on a warrant where they would make the decision as opposed to politicians. So breakout sessions. I have one thing to get out for you. It's only going to tell you where you're going to go. Uh-oh. So these are, so let me just go over this really quickly.
So at the point in time, the actual version of the training session is going to conclude. We can't really stream 10 different breakout sessions to you at the same time. But what we would say is that you should follow up with the Election Modernization Coalition, have your own strategy planning session to get connected to your own local community team with people who are here and other people who've signed up. You can email me, Eric Cashdan from Common Cause at ekashdan@commoncause.org, or give me a call at 617-426-9600 to get in touch, and we'll connect you to your team and have a strategy session. We'll show you these next steps. You can visit earlyvotingma.com for this video to rewatch our point that we used, and you can get the toolkit that you can use, and you can run with that if you want, or we can guide you along the way. So if you have any questions, please contact me, and thank you for joining us tonight. Hope you have a good day.
Which is just one group